Hello, Gorillas Club. Oof, I'm sorry if I look a little bit sweaty and a little bit drippier than usual, but it is so hot here in my studio. So as long as you don't mind being taught something by a sweaty person, please follow along, because today we're making a really sturdy tote out of scrap material. I hope you like the project. You will need some scrap fabric, enough to make the tote the size you want it. No rules about the size, but make sure you have enough for the size you want. It's going to be front and back. You're going to need something to measure so that you can cut. You are going to need a cutting tool. I have scissors, but I'm probably going to cut mine out with my handy dandy little rolling cutter. Pins, and some way of sewing your tote together. I'm going to use my machine, but you can use a needle and thread like you would with any other project, and you can just use a seam stitch or a running stitch to do that. So as you can see, I have my piece of fabric folded in half. I have this really handy little hem up here. My scrap fabric used to be a sheet, so I'm going to use that hem as the top of my bag. It's already done for me. And the first cut I'm going to make will be the height of my bag. How tall I want my bag is up to me, but I'm going to try and use the most of the fabric that I can. So if you look on my ruler, I have inch increment measurements here. So I think, let's see, how tall do I want you to be? I'm going to make it, about 15 inches, so I'm going to cut some extra and cut at 16. I just line it up. If you are cutting with scissors, you could make a little line in pen. Then, I don't want to block you guys, but let's see. Oop. There we go. I've removed my excess. Then going to come out here and try and use as much of my fabric as possible. There we go. So this is the approximate size of my tote bag now. Now, to do my French theme, I am going to be leaving my fabric right sides out, wrong sides together. This is probably counter to a lot of things you've been taught. We're always taught right sides together, but I am doing it this way for a reason. I hope you'll see after I've done it for the first time. Now, if you got your pins, now is a great time in helping you sew. Go ahead and pin as many places as you need. Never feel like you're winning the fewer pins you have. If you need those pins to hold your fabric together, there is no rule that says you have to get away with as few as possible. Use as many as you need. No such thing as wasting pins, you know? So, just so you can understand a little bit better and see clearer, I have it folded over here. So this saves me a seam I have to do. I have these two sides all pinned up and ready to sew. I'm just going to sew about 1/4 of an inch from the edge, come down to my corner here and sew 1/4 of an inch from the edge to here. Of course, we always, if we're using a machine, we're going to go back and forth a couple times at the beginning and end to lock it. And if you're just using a needle and thread to do your sewing, you should be making some good knots. If you need an example of knots in your sewing, you can view any of my mending videos from the previous weeks, and that should help you a lot. Here we are. I have done my 2 seams. Actually, I'll keep it in the same orientation spin so that you can see clearly. Side seam, bottom seam. See this corner here? We're going to need to cut that corner off. Careful not to cut through your stitches. You just want to remove that so that it doesn't get in your way. And then we're going to turn this inside out. So you can see there's where my seam is. I'm looking at the inside now. I want to get that corner pushed out as much as I can. So if you have a real tight, small corner, you might want to use a chopstick or a skewer. Just want to get that nice and sharp. You also want to make sure that you have your seam as close to the edge as possible, the seam you just did. You don't want a bunch of extra material in your way here. So just work those seams out as much as possible. See, like, instead of just folding it in and see, I would get a bunch of extra fabric there. Force those seams out. Fold them over and pin them. You're going to do this around the whole bottom as well. If you're having trouble, you can press this. My flannel that I'm working with here is pretty easy to work with. I don't need to press it to turn it, but you might find it's helpful. You'll need to pin less if you have pressed it as well. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to sew those seams again. When I do that, I'm going to be catching this material inside of that seam. So if I did a 1/4 inch seam last time, seam allowance, then I'm going to want to do a little bit more. I'm going to go for a full 1/2 inch so that I know that seam allowance is caught inside. I'm going to go sew that now. So here we have it. I've done another seam on the inside, just like I did on the outside. I'm going to use my scissors real quick, tidy up these extra threads. My work shouldn't come unraveled because I went forwards and backwards when I was starting. And now I can turn this right way out. These little corners are always tricky, but just work on them and they'll turn. There we have it. The body of my bag is complete. And because I did these French seams, there are no raw edges inside, which is really nice, and it's much stronger, even stronger than if I serged it. You can do a French seam with your machine or by hand, it doesn't matter, but it's always going to add strength to your piece. So now, you've got to decide what you want to do for handles, because a tote is only useful if you can actually tote things with it, and I need handles. So what I'm going to do is I am going to use the rest of this material as much as I can to make my handles. A good way of making strong handles is by multiplying the width you want by 4. You do this because you are going to be folding your handles over twice. If you need an example, you would fold it like a book, you know? Fold your pieces in like that, and then fold it one more time so you've got the strength of layers and you don't have any raw edges on the outside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut some 4-inch strips. I want inch-wide straps, and I'll show you how that comes together. So here I have my 4-inch strip of fabric, cut nice and neatly. Because I had such strange scraps, I continued cutting 4 inches even if they were too short to be a strap. And you see I just sewed them neatly on to my longer scrap, and I pressed the seam. So I've got this nice tidy look now. Now what I want to do is I want to fold my seams into the center like that. And if you have an iron, now would be a really good time to press. Fold them like a book fold. Then you're going to want to fold them flat like that. If you don't have an iron, use pins at this time, but I'm going to press them because it'll be a lot easier for me. So use your iron if you have it. If you don't, just start pinning. That's 1 fold, 2 fold, and then 3 fold. So you've got 4 layers of fabric on these strong straps. So as you can see, a little pressing makes all the difference. There's my nice folds. Then I can very easily fold this down like this and pin it. Whoops, let me grab my pins here. Now you might be saying, hey, you're making a tote bag. You need 2 straps, right? And yes, I do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create my straps first, and then I'm going to cut it in half, and then I will have that much strap for each side of my tote bag. So this is all kind of the preliminary work to making my straps and putting them on. There we go. I'm going to sew down the open side and down the closed side. So I think that'll make a really sturdy, flat strap that won't bunch up. So here are my straps. You can see I've got this really great finish, having sewn on both edges. They're very strong. You'll be able to carry books or whatever heavy things you want, heavy groceries, drinks and things in this bag because you've got strong straps and you've got really strong seams on the bag. Now I'm going to take this, fold it in half, and I'm going to separate it on that edge there, giving me 2 straps. With the amount of material I had, I'm able to have about 26-inch straps, so I'm able to even put this, oh, pardon me, I got the hiccups, on my shoulder when I'm carrying it. How long you want your straps to be, that's up to you, and up to how much material you have, because I'm making this just with scraps. So now, I'm going to take my great tote that I just finished, and I'm going to turn it back out again. I'm going to lay it flat, and my tote is about a little under, let's see, it's about 13 inches. So, laying it flat, I want to center my straps. Now let's see, your placement of your straps is totally up to you, but you'll probably want to make them even. I'm starting by counting after my seam so that these are nicely centered. So what I'm doing right now, I think I'll go 1, 2, 3 inches in. Then you want to get a good 1.5 inches at least of strap down there. So I'm going to pin those right in place here. There's 1, 2, easy peasy. Flip it over, and now that you've got these ones centered, you won't even have to measure. Just lay it right on top, match it up. Oops. One. And 2. All right. And then we're going to sew these. It doesn't matter if you're hand sewing or sewing with a machine. I'm going to show you a way of making a really strong connection so that the straps are as tightly connected to the purse with the same strength as the straps were constructed and the tote was constructed. So what you're going to do is, in this area is where you're going to be sewing. You're going to sew a rectangle around here. Then, to give it additional strength, you're going to sew an X. Now, you may choose to do this however you want. Maybe you'll want to go one over, 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 re-sew that, especially important here, because that's where it can separate, down, re-sew that, and up. You can do your whole box first, do it a couple times to give it strength, and then sew your X. It really doesn't matter. This pattern is an excellent foundation for straps, and I'm going to sew that now. There we go. I've sewn everything. I'm going to do a quick snip, trim off any excess thread I might have. Let's see. Collect them up. These are just the little finishing touches that really make your completed work crisp and fresh looking. So this is my inside. Let's flip it around. And there it is. A super sturdy tote made out of recycled materials, guaranteed to carry whatever goodies you need to get home. Whether it's a gallon of milk or 10 library books, this will get you through a whole bus ride or a whole bike ride back to your house. So make yourself a sturdy tote and just enjoy the process. Well, there you go. You can see it's simple and it's a super practical thing to sew yourself. It's all straight lines, and if you're doing it by hand, it can be a very meditative process as you just slowly stitch by yourself. So I really do hope that you make this, and I hope that you use it often, especially once things open up a bit more. We're going to be using lots and lots of reusable bags at the supermarket. So the supermarket, the library, over at the public market, there's so many things you can use this for. So make yourself a bag, use up some of your scrap fabric, and have fun doing it. Thanks for tuning in this week, guys, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.